listeners, and welcome to the Sailing and Cruising the East Coast of the United States podcast. I'm Bela Musitz.
And I'm Mike Wasserman. Hey, Bela, it's been a while. What's new in your world?
Hey, well, first of all, we have a new supporter for the podcast, Gene Martell. Along with Jonathan, Robert, and Andrew, they all make a monthly contribution to support the podcast. Thank you very much. You know, Gene reached out to me via an email several weeks ago, and he said he was, first of all, he said he really enjoyed the podcast, which was very heartening to hear. And then he said he was interested in purchasing a sailboat. He has owned boats in the past, but they've been motorboats, and he's been thinking about buying a sailboat. And in his email, he said, hey, he'd love to have a conversation and bounce a few ideas off of me, things he was thinking about, and maybe give him a little advice. So a few days later, we connected on the telephone, and we had a great conversation. Got to know him a little bit, and the types of sailing he's thinking about doing, the types of sailboats he was looking at. And we had a really good, probably an hour and a half long conversation. And Gene's in the process of whittling his list of potential boats down to a pretty narrow scope right now. And I know he sent me a follow-up email about a week later and said he was going to look at a particular boat that he thought would fit him really well. And hopefully he'll be out on the water next spring. So I really enjoyed speaking with him. And thanks again, Gene, for supporting the podcast. Really appreciate it. And let me just say, you know, if there's other listeners that are thinking about buying a boat or would like to chit-chat about something, feel free to reach out, and I'm happy to have those conversations.
Bela, I agree. It's great to be growing the community of listeners. And, you know, it's something interesting that somebody was asking me the other day about, isn't podcasting just like teaching, right? And it's really different in the sense that podcasting really feels one way, right? As we record these things and then people listen to them, and there isn't when I'm teaching, even when I'm teaching online, at least when I'm teaching a live course, there's this dialogue, there's this back and forth, there's an exchange. And to me, that's the real value of building a community, right? Is exchanging ideas with people and learning from one another, which is cool. There's so many benefits to interacting and engaging in a community, especially that's focused on an area of interest, right? Like in this case, sailing. So I'm really happy to hear that people are reaching out with questions and comments. And Bela, exactly what you said. If people have questions and want to engage, sending an email is a great way to start that conversation. You know.
Yeah, it was really nice. It's really nice when we get emails, and it's happened several times in the past, and this was, I think, the first one that sort of led to a conversation and discussion and getting to know each other and sharing some of our interest with each other.
What's new with the boat?
Yeah, the boat. Yeah. So Paradox is all set for the winter. I was out 2 weeks ago, right after Thanksgiving. We went out and Rhode Island, and I got the canvas cover on her. It has a big 3-piece cover that I put on it for the winter. Most boats get shrink wrapped, which is this type of plastic that gets put on a boat on the deck and draped over the deck like a tent. And it's heat shrinkable plastic, so they can shrink it really tight. But I was fortunate that this boat has a canvas cover that the previous owner had purchased. So put that on. Boy, I tell you, it was cold. I think I waited a little bit too long to put in the season here to get her covered up because it was windy and cold, and this canvas cover's wrestling with it. Even two of us, Andy was helping me, and it was a challenge. And the other thing that's going on is the bottom of the boat is due for a paint job, and what happens with boats is you keep applying more and more paint, and after a while you sort of have to strip the paint off and start back fresh again. And so the way they do that is with something called media blasting. So it's like a sand blaster, but it doesn't blast out sand. It blasts out baking soda or some other, a little bit of a softer abrasive. And so I had the bottom of the boat media blasted, and the yard was able to put on one coat of what's called a barrier coat, which is a 2-part epoxy paint onto the hull. So that'll seal it up for the winter. And because that needs a warm temperature to be able to cure. So we'll put on 2 more coats in the spring and then some bottom paint, and we should be ready and all good for a long period of time then after that. So that's the stuff going on with the boat. But yeah, it's put away and a little sad. We had a great first season, and but that I think putting it away also, at least the way my brain works, gets me all juiced up about next spring. If I had the boat 12 months a year, I'd probably feel a little bit different about it. But this way, I always get excited about it and miss it, and then want to get engaged with it in the spring.
I like your philosophy on this, Bela. So I'm really actually excited about this week's guest, Bela. I know it's a former guest, and I enjoyed his last appearance. Give us the overview.
Yeah, so this week's guest is Joe Hagan. This is Joe's second appearance on the podcast. He was on the podcast in episode 11, and he's a longtime sailor, and he recently retired from the corporate life, and he started a business. He started Offshore Adventure Sailing. And Offshore Adventure Sailing is a business where Joe takes people out on multiple-day ocean passages. And that's what episode 11 was all about with Joe. We talked about his business, sort of the types of trips he takes, the types of people that join him on those adventures. And so if you're interested in that, please give episode 11 a listen. In this episode, Joe and I discuss his trip and his adventures on the East Coast this summer. So this summer was the first time that Joe started in Florida and sailed all the way up to Maine. And he did portions of that trip with his wife, and he did other portions of that trip with some paying customers, people who wanted to experience sort of ocean passages. And so it was really good. And it's quite a long trip from Florida to Maine. And so we had a great conversation, and it was a long conversation. So I broke it into 2 parts. And this is part 1. Part 2 will be released in about 2 weeks from when this podcast is released. So hopefully you can listen to both of them.
Sounds great, Bela. Let's jump right into the discussion with Joe Hagan.
Hello, folks, and welcome to Sailing and Cruising the East Coast of the United States. My guest today is Joe Hagan, who runs Offshore Adventure Sailing. Joe was a guest back in episode 12, where he talked about his business and how he takes individuals off in his boat to various different adventures and along the East Coast of the United States. And this past summer, he sailed up the East Coast of the United States, all the way from Florida up to Maine and then back down again. So I thought that would be a great conversation to have, to see how that his summer adventure went. And I'm sure he's got some good stories. So welcome to the show, Joe.
Thank you, Bella. It's good to see you again.
Yeah, same here. So how you doing?
Life's good. I last spoke to you, I think it was New Year's Eve. And so almost a year has gone by. Now it's nearly Thanksgiving Eve. So
yeah,
we get together on holidays.
Yeah, seems that. Yeah. But here we are, like you said, almost a year later. COVID is still going on.
Yeah.
Where you are, it's hot and heavy, or maybe it's cooled off a little bit. But I'll tell you, this summer, the sailing season was good for me up in Narragansett Bay and Long Island Sound and stuff.
Outstanding. I've followed along a little bit, the Adventures of Paradox, and it sounds like you're having fun.
Yeah, we sure are. And the boat's on the hard right now. So had it pulled probably 3 weeks ago now. And I have one more trip to go out there, and that'll be after Thanksgiving here, the week after Thanksgiving, heading out for a few days to get the boat covered and all tucked away for the winter. So the boat actually has a full canvas cover that I will put on it. And so then we just wait till April when things get warm again.
Yeah, great. Yeah, mine's on the hard also, so it's that time of year, I guess.
Yeah.
For some.
Yeah, remind me where your boat is and where you are.
So my boat, La Peregrina, is in Charleston at a boatyard there, and I'm having a bit of a little refit done. So I'm excited about it, but also chomping at the bit to go sailing. And it's only been 2 weeks since I got off the boat, and I'm already dreaming about going again.
Yeah, yeah. If I remember correctly, Charleston is where the mega dock is. Is that right?
I don't know Charleston that well, and that doesn't really mean anything to me.
Oh, okay. I think it's
There is a Charleston city boatyard has a big dock, and perhaps that's what you're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. We spent a couple of days there a number of years ago, coming up from Florida, and I bought a T-shirt, and on the back of it says, mega dock, because I think it's the longest dock.
Yes.
In the East Coast or something, and it certainly is a mega dock. Yeah.
Yeah. That sounds right.
And so the boat's there. And where were you, if I remember?
So I live in Nashville.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So I'm home.
What do you haven't done to the boat?
Well, it's the boat has been in service for a year. We launched it October 30th of last year and hauled it out, I think, on the 7th of November. So it was over 12 months of more or less constant use. And I'm anxious to go sailing in the spring, and I don't want to have any limitations. So I'm doing some rather biggish things. I'm having the motor overhauled. I'm upgrading the electronics, replacing the life raft with a new model, bottom job, of course, and about 100 other smaller projects.
Yeah, and remind our listeners the type of vessel and the size and stuff.
Yeah, so it's a Cabo Rico 34. It's a fairly small boat, but it's a solid, heavy, full-keeled boat, and I'm emotionally attached.
Yeah, well, yeah, it is amazing how we all sort of get emotionally attached to our boats, isn't it?
Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah.
All right.
So tell us about your summer. Where did it start, and just kind of take us through it.
Yeah, so this season has sort of been turned upside down for us because we normally sail in the winter months. We normally head out in late October or early November and sail until Memorial Day. Usually going, to the Caribbean and Bahamas. We sail the tropics typically. But with COVID, that was really problematic. Just getting in through international borders was a problem.
Yeah, staying in one country makes a lot of sense right now, doesn't it?
Exactly. And, I had never sailed north of the Chesapeake, so this was an opportunity to see new territory and, in some respects, get out of our comfort zone. And it's been great. We, like I said, we launched the boat last October. We spent the remainder of 2020 all around southwest Florida. So as far north as Charlotte Harbor, which is just north of Fort Myers, out to the Dry Tortugas, the Everglades, the southern Florida Keys, Key West, Marathon, Boot Key Harbor, that sort of area. And we, so I sort of think about our East Coast travels as stretching from the lighthouse on Loggerhead Key and Dry Tortugas to the lighthouse on, I think it's called Head Harbor Light on Campobello Island in New Brunswick. We left the Dry Tortugas in December, spent a couple of months in the lower Keys as my wife studied for her captain's license, left Florida, not left Florida, but left the Keys on the 1st of March, reached Isle of Shoals in Maine on the 1st of June, and then spent all of June, July, August, and half of September in Maine before sort of getting speeded up again and moving south, leaving Maine in mid-September and arriving Charleston in early November.
Yeah. Yeah. That's an amazing variety of
It is.
of terrain and tides and shoreline and everything. It's just remarkable, right? The variety that you get.
That's exactly right. I mean, the diversity, the difference the water's different, the weather's different, the bottom of the sea is different. I mean, everything's different. It's all fabulous.
Yeah, yeah. So, what part of this did you take customers with, clients?
I think I did about 8 charters over the course of the year, or 9, maybe 10. I don't know. So I did trips, a couple of trips out to the Dry Tortugas. I did a trip. My wife and I were alone on the boat from the Florida Keys up to Charleston, and then had clients from Charleston to Newport. My wife did from Newport to Campobello Island and back to Bar Harbor, Maine. And then again had clients from Bar Harbor down to Port Jefferson in Long Island Sound.
Yeah.
She joined me for the trip through the East River and around Sandy Hook and up the Delaware Bay and through the C&D Canal and back down to the southern Chesapeake, to Norfolk. Yeah.
So let's just work our way up the East Coast here. So let's talk a little bit about the East Coast of Florida. What's the highlights? What are the must-stop places? What are the memorable moments for you on that part, at that leg of this journey?
Yeah, I mean, that's familiar territory to me that I've sailed many times, and so there wasn't the amazement and wonder that there was further north, just because it was familiar, right? We love sailing offshore, and so we left Boot Key Harbor and sailed north up past Miami. I remember sailing past Miami in the middle of the night, and all that, the big city lights, and we came in, I think, at Lake Worth at Palm Beach, West Palm Beach, and took the ICW because of weather. It was still early in the year. It was early March, and cold fronts come through, and sailing offshore against the cold front is not pleasant and really not even safe. So we took the ICW as far as Ponce Inlet, which is up near New Smyrna Beach, and then went outside again all the way to Charleston. No, I'm sorry. We went in at Brunswick, Brunswick, Georgia, and in fact kept the boat there for a couple of weeks. Went down to Cumberland Island in South Georgia. That's a great place. Absolutely wonderful place.
Yeah.
So we were heading north quickly. And I'll tell you one thing about this whole trip going north is that we were 2 weeks too early. We were always getting the last winter storm all the way up.
Yeah.
And it was always cold and miserable. But we had a ball anyway, of course.
One of the great things that I find about, from Florida all the way up to the Chesapeake is that you do have this option of going the ICW or going outside.
Right.
And oftentimes, as you guys did, you mix it up depending upon weather, depending upon what you want to see. And I can't think of many other places where you sort of have that option of,
you're right.
You can go outside or you can go inside. And And here again, the variety of wildlife and things that you see, the types of houses you see, the types of boats you see, and commercial
Right.
fisheries, et cetera, is just remarkable.
Yeah. Absolutely. And this was a little bit of an unusual year. Not, I mean, I guess it's all COVID related, but um, you did not have, like us, people were not going to the Bahamas in the numbers that typically do. So many people were cruising up and down the East Coast that might otherwise have headed out to the Caribbean. The Canadians were not around, and you usually see a lot of boats from Canada heading south, or north in the spring. So that was unusual. Yeah, but it was all great.
Yeah, yeah. So let's see. We got Florida, then we go to Georgia, then South Carolina, North Carolina. So did you go outside, inside through that stretch?
So we left Brunswick and sailed offshore up to Charleston, which was my first encounter this year with heavy fog.
Mm.
And it was a precursor of what I was going to get a lot more of later.
Yeah, yeah.
But we got to Charleston, and from there I had clients. So we went, because of weather, we went up the ICW as far as Winya Bay, which is only about a good long day's trip up the ICW. And from there went offshore up to Cape Lookout, Beaufort, North Carolina. Cape Lookout. I had never been there. Have you ever been there? It's fantastic.
No, I have not. Nope.
It's just such a wonderful spot. So that was a highlight. Going up to Cape Lookout, I think we spent a couple of nights at anchor there, and before heading into Beaufort, which is a half day's sail away.
Yeah. I recall, now that you were talking about fog, I recall my first experience with fog. We were coming up from Cape May, going up to Sandy Hook. So sailing up the coast of New Jersey, and it's an overnight sail. And I remember I was on watch, and I don't know, we were, who knows what, 5 to 10 miles offshore, and you can see the lights of New Jersey, and I'm sailing along, other folks are sleeping, and all of a sudden I noticed the lights disappeared. I couldn't see any lights on shore anymore, and I go, that's really strange. I mean, maybe it's a swampy part of New Jersey or something, And but it just bothered me because it was like, this doesn't make sense. And I got out my big flashlight and I just kind of shined it out into the distance, and it was white. Yep, it was all mist and white. And I go, uh-oh, we're in the fog. That's why everything disappeared, because it was a no moon night. So it wasn't like the stars, it was a cloudy, it was overcast, so there was no stars, there was no moon. So it was just the micro environment remained the same. And I didn't feel any fog, I didn't see any fog, but then I was, so that was sort of like and then, half an hour later we popped out of it, and it was it was all good. And it was,
but that first time you're surrounded by fog is just a little bit spooky and scary.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, it was, being at night, it wasn't disorienting because I wasn't sort of depending upon a lot of landmarks anyway, or the sun or the horizon, because it was one of those really dark nights. But it was still sort of like, now people don't see our lights. I don't see other people's lights. And at this point in time, the boat I was on did not have AIS. So, I was like, it just made us all nervous. But fog is, so you don't get fog down south, huh?
Well, I mean, we'll have it early in the morning, but not really in the salty water that, I like to sail in.
Yeah.
The fog is typically inland on lakes and rivers, and we don't have much fog. For years, I kept my boat in New Orleans, and Lake Pontchartrain would fog up sometimes. But years of sailing the tropics, we just didn't deal with fog.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. So Cape Lookout, and then you head north up. Did you go up the Chesapeake and the D&O Canal, or did you go a straight shot?
We took the ICW from Beaufort up to Norfolk.
Yeah.
Because there was a pretty strong north wind going off of Cape Hatteras. It just wasn't right, although I was really jonesing to get out there. But we took the ICW to Norfolk and then sailed up to Annapolis. Just an overnight sail.
Yeah.
I think it was about 30-hour trip or something like that, which was great fun. And so I had a crew change there. My wife came up for a little while, and we sort of sailed down the Chesapeake. And then I had crew join me again in Norfolk, and we sailed, this time offshore, straight up to Newport.
Oh, very nice.
Yeah. It was a great trip. The weather was wonderful. We stopped at Block Island, which was a new place for me. We came into Narragansett Bay, where I had never sailed before. Because we were ahead of schedule and had time, we spent a couple of days exploring Narragansett Bay. And I remember we spent a night at Dutch Harbor, which is just on the other side of the bridge from Newport. And then went up to, I think it's called Prudence Island, maybe?
Yep, Prudence Island, yep.
Yeah, went up there and anchored and walked around that little island, which was great fun. And then went to Newport, where my wife joined me again. And so along the way here, I was off the boat occasionally. I'd take like a week to go home and get a vaccine or whatever I needed to do, pay my taxes, file my taxes, that sort of thing. But yeah, Mary Beth and I left Newport in late May and explored Buzzards Bay and the Elizabeth Islands, Cutty Honk. We spent a night in New Bedford, Massachusetts, Hadley Harbor, went through the C&D Canal, the Cape Cod Canal.
Yep, Cape Cod Canal, yep.
Went up to P-Town, which was fun, and then sailed up to Gloucester.
Mm-hmm.
We got to Gloucester on Memorial Day weekend, just in time for 4 days of pouring, miserable, rainy weather.
Yeah.
But despite that, we had a good time, and it was, Gloucester's a really great town. Have you spent time there?
I've been there as a land-based tourist, but not as a water-based tourist.
Well, they've got this in the inner harbor. They've got moorings, and you can stay on a mooring, and they've got a launch service that comes and picks you up and runs you back and forth. So you don't even have to drop your dinghy down. You can just step out off your boat. Somebody picks you up, takes you to the dock. You can walk around town. There's some great restaurants. There's that Crow's Nest bar is there, which is famous because it was the meeting place for the guys on the Perfect Storm. What was the name of that boat? The Andrea Gale, I think.
Yeah,
that was lost. So that was like a cultural experience right there.
There's a few places I've been to. Port Washington is one that comes to mind. That's on the north shore of Long Island Sound,
right,
sort of at the western end. It's like a great stopping point if you're going through the East River and through New York Harbor and stuff. And that's another one of these places where they have moorings, they have a launch service, and as a matter of fact, the first 2 nights, the moorings are free. So you can stay there for free, and they charge you for the launch service. But if you stay longer than 2 nights, then I think the moorings are like 20 or $30 a night, but then the launch service is free.
Right.
And it makes it so convenient. And
it does.
Those places are gems that sort of cater to sailors or boaters, I should say, not just sailors, but boaters, and make it really easy to get on shore and, spend your money, which is good. They figured it out. It works for the economy. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, that was a difference as you go further north up the East Coast, you start, the infrastructure supporting cruising sort of changes.
Yeah.
And that's a good example of it. Yeah.
Yeah. So given COVID and, earlier you made the comment, a lot of people were cruising locally because they weren't going to the islands. They weren't trying to get in and out of other countries. Did you find anchorages crowded? Did you have trouble getting a mooring? Did you have to sometimes you go, I've been to places in Narragansett Bay where I plan to stay here, but I get there and the anchorage is full. So I always had to have a plan B.
Yeah.
Not because of weather, but because of space. Did you find any of that?
We didn't have any trouble. I remember Hadley Harbor. It was kind of full. That's up in the Elizabeth Islands. It was kind of full, but there was room for us to anchor. It wasn't much trouble. I don't have a perspective on what a normal year is. So I can't really tell you if it was more crowded or less crowded than, normal, but it was certainly no problem for us.
Yeah.
All right. We're going to cut it here and make this part one. And next, Mike and I will make a few comments about what Joe said, and then keep on the lookout for part 2, which will be out shortly. Thanks.
Well, Bela, that really was a great conversation. Great stories. The travel log was amazing. I loved the aspect that even with you two being kind of veteran sailors, certainly compared to me, right, that you still have this passion for discovery and learning, right, new things. How much of the excitement of sailing for you is discovery and learning?
Boy, I would say the excitement of life for me is discovering and learning, right? It transcends my whole life, not just sailing. And it's reflected in everything I do. I often have said, I really like doing something the first time. The second time is still a fair amount of fun, but when it's the fourth and fifth time and it's the same, I start getting bored. So that to me is one of the real things that draw me into sailing, is because even though, every day to maybe the unobserved seems the same, it's very different. The winds are different. The water's different. The way the boats, the tides are different. What you see is different. And to me, that's the exciting part. And the other interesting thing about sailing, and I've drawn this analogy numerous times, there's the analogy between fly fishing, which I love to do, and sailing, is that in a half hour, I can have you sailing a boat or I can have you fly fishing. Both of those endeavors look harder than they actually are. So in a half hour, I can get you to sail a boat. In a half hour, I can get you to cast a fly rod. But if you want, you can spend the rest of your life trying to understand the subtleties of those two endeavors. And there's probably a lot of things like that in the world, right? But if you want, you can spend your whole life trying to figure out how to fine tune your boat so it goes, perfectly through the water, or how to really, cast your fly rod and pick out the right fly for the conditions, etc. So to me, that's one of the sort of interesting, exciting things for us. And I think that came out in Joe as well, right? I mean, he's really excited about this notion of, going out and just experiencing a new adventure. And I'll tell you, every time's a new adventure. I used to get bored commuting back and forth to work because that felt the same every day. It was just like, where's the traffic jam going to be? It's not whether there's going to be a traffic jam or not. The only variable was where the traffic jam was going to be. But in sailing, and it's different, boy. It's really neat. It's one of the exciting things for me, for sure.
Cool. I love it. Another question I had is, I mean, you're two guys that are, passionate about sailing, and that really came through. What do you see are the key differences between sailing for pleasure, which is what you do, versus sailing as a business, which is part of what Joe does?
I'll break that down even a little bit refiner and try to draw an analogy here. I myself have noticed a significant difference between being crew on a boat and being the captain of the boat. So when I've been on other people's boats, I don't worry about stuff that's going on, right? I don't worry much about, I sort of pay attention to make sure we're not going to get in trouble, and I just sort of do a sanity check on things. But I don't really, worry about the various different aspects of being responsible for everyone on the boat and the boat itself. But when I'm captain of the boat, or I'm on my own boat, boy, that responsibility is front and center. When I go out with my wife, or I go out with my kids and my grandkids, boy, there's a lot of other stuff rolling around in my brain because I'm responsible for everyone on that boat, and I'm responsible for the boat. And I think the same, it probably goes up a couple orders of magnitude when you have paying customers on the boat, right? Or you have clients, because now you're responsible for them as well. And so, that's a significant responsibility, and they're paying you for the experience. So you want them to have a good time. So you're trying to tailor the experience to match sort of their expectations and their desires. So there's a fair amount of sort of customer service, customer engagement, and relationships involved there in trying, and they're with you for 24 hours a day, for 3 or 4 days in a row in a small confined space. So it's there's this interesting, I think, dynamic that goes on there. That's probably much more challenging to manage than the actual sailing trip itself. And the other interesting thing is, when you're sailing for pleasure, I'm not on a schedule, right? If I make it a certain distance, I make it a certain distance. But if you have people you're taking out, and they arrive on a certain day, and they're expected to be dropped off at some place a certain day because they have airplane reservations to fly home, or they have people meeting them or whatever, now all of a sudden you sort of have scheduling constraints. So that, I think, adds another degree of complexity to it, because there's certain days when I'd rather not go sailing. I'd rather be sitting at anchor, either because there's not enough wind or there's way too much wind. So I think it's adds several degrees of complexity to the equation that I think are interesting. And Joe enjoys that, and he likes dealing with that, and I think that's part of the challenge for him.
And it's the customer focused mentality. I think some people are focused on that, and they love that, right? We've talked in our world, dealing with entrepreneurs, right? That some people just love customer service. But yeah, for me, that would be a little bit tough. But cool, great stories, and I love the details of the various ports and bridges and docks and restaurants and all kinds of cool stuff, which is neat. So I'm really looking forward to hearing part 2 and hearing the rest of the trip, right? So
Absolutely. No, it was good.
Yeah, let's wrap it up. Listeners, thanks again for joining us for another episode. We hope you found the conversation with Joe Hagen interesting and thought-provoking, just like we did. As always, if you have questions about what we've discussed, or you, like we said at the top of the podcast, have some questions for Bela or I, please get in touch with us. We're happy to hear from you. Our email is sailingtheeast, that's all one word, @gmail.com.
Hey, and if you enjoyed the podcast, hit that follow button in your favorite podcasting application. And if you know of someone who'd make a good guest on the show, let us know. We'd love to have them be a guest and share their experiences with our listeners. So it's getting cold now, and the boat's put away, but I'm looking forward to next spring. And so until next time, signing off from cold, snowy upstate New York. See you all soon.
Sounds great, Bela. And from over here in Germany where there's no snow, and I'm just seeing the sun is about to go down here at about 3:30 in the afternoon, but at least I see some blue sky out my window. From over here in Münster, Germany, auf Wiedersehen. See you next time.